You've been asking the model for JSON and hoping. In 2026, you can stop hoping. Welcome to the Atlas. You've prompted for JSON and parsed it by hand more times than you can count. This episode is about making invalid output impossible and the feature that does it. Every integration has the same scar tissue. You prompt respond only in JSON. You prefill an opening brace to skip the friendly preamble. You wrap the parse in a try except. And you retry when the model adds a sentence or quotes a number that should have been bare. It works most of the time, and that last sliver pages you at 2 in the morning. The documentation itself now steers you away from this. It says, plainly, if you need the model to always output valid JSON that conforms to a schema, use structured outputs instead of these prompt engineering tricks. And one of those tricks, pre-filling the assistant term with an opening brace, is no longer supported on the current flagship models. The thing you leaned on is being retired, and the replacement is what this episode is about. Prompting asks for a shape and hopes. The new feature makes any other shape unreachable. That is not a better prompt. It is a different mechanism, and it went generally available on the API in early 2026. Structured output names 3 different things. Use the wrong one for the job, and you'll fight the API. So here's the map you orient by before you write a line. Surface 1, JSON Outputs. The output config format parameter constrains what the model says. Its final response becomes JSON that matches your schema. Surface 2, strict tool use. Setting strict to true on a tool constrains how the model calls your function. The tool's arguments match your schema. Surface 3, the AgentKit's output format option, which gets you validated JSON out of an agent that worked across many turns. Same idea. A schema is a contract. 3 different places to enforce it. 2 of these live in the raw API and share one engine. The third lives in the AgentKit and works differently. Knowing which surface you're on is half the exam. The first 2, the response, and the tool input are the constraint pair. Start there. Here's the difference between hoping and guaranteeing, and it lives one level below the prompt. At the moment, the model picks its next token. Both API surfaces compile your schema into a grammar, then constrain the model's token sampling to only schema valid outputs. The documented name for this is grammar constrained sampling. It is not the model trying harder to be correct. At each token, the invalid choices are simply removed from what it's allowed to pick. A letter where a digit must go, gone. A quote where a number must go, gone. That is why the docs can promise no more parse errors, guaranteed field types, no retries for schema violations. And it is why strict tool use and JSON outputs share the very same compilation pipeline. One engine, 2 places to point it. This is the mechanical reason guaranteed is not a slogan. A prompt changes what's likely. A grammar changes what's possible. The only difference between the 2 API surfaces is where it applies the response or a tool input. You want the model's answer to be a JSON object, a sentiment, a list of issues, a set of action items, ready to hand straight to a database. One parameter does it. You add an output config object whose format is type JSON schema, and you hand it your schema, the properties, the required fields, and additional properties set to false, which the feature requires for objects. The model's response then comes back as valid JSON in the first content block's text field. No parsing gymnastics. No retry loop. One note for anyone migrating. The parameter used to be called the output format parameter, and it now lives at output config's format field. The old name still works for a transition period, and the beta header is gone. And for Python or TypeScript, you don't even handwrite the schema. Define it as a pydantic model or a Zod schema, and the kit generates the JSON schema for you and parses the result back into a typed object. This is the surface for when the answer is the data. When the structured thing you want is the model's reply itself, this is the lane.